Welcome to Dockside Magic. We talk about flavor and functionality in the competitive commander format. I'm your host Isaac, accompanied by my brother Aaron.
Hey, hey.
And my best friend Kevin.
What's up, guys? So today we are looking into our group top 10 win enabling cards.
And we wanted to kind of distinguish cards that say, like, I win or something, a specific combo. We're going to specifically dive into cards that we try to resolve that help us enable that combo or get to that combo.
So for this format, we chose to pick our personal favorite top 10s, kind of cumulatively even, top 10 cards that we thought were the best to resolve, that got us to win the most efficiently, or even were the most flavorful and fun to resolve. So starting the list off, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin here. He's going to jump right into number 10 for us.
Yeah, thanks, dude. So for our number 10 win enabler card, we have a very friendly Goblin Pirate. Some of you may know him. I would assume most of you know him, actually. It's Dockside Extortionist. He is a 1/2 Goblin Pirate that reads, when Dockside Extortionist enters the battlefield, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments
Treasures.
your opponents control. Yeah, so
Colorless and red for all that power.
this guy is crazy. You resolve a Dockside Extortionist, and we are assuming that your deck is built to absolutely abuse this all of the sudden 5+ mana that you are gaining in net value from resolving the spell, in just completely abusing him with spells such as, Chain of Vapor, of course, Snap, or any other generic bounce for a non-creature or creature permanent.
I mean, not even to mention, you got like the MAL or like your Baron Master Wizards, which just kind of go infinite together.
Combo piece for sure.
It's an outlet for sure for infinite mana.
Oh yeah, this guy is very easily an A for an A+B combo. In terms of enablement, though, I mean, this guy just enables quicker wins for every single deck that I see him in.
I love the fact that he's on a body. He's a creature. He's harder to interact with. It can be used as a ritual. We already talked a little bit about the combo pieces that can be done with it, that can be assembled relatively easily. The fact that he's a pirate, let's talk about that. That's kind of fun too. In red has got chaos. It's one of the cards that you see played, and it's like, okay, the entire table is awake. Dockside lives for a full 4-top pod. More players playing, the more possible, opportunities and treasures that will come of it.
I feel like right now, like, Dockside's actually like one of the most like cut and dry red cards out there. Like, it's actually just simple. Like, you just play the card and make more mana than you played. It's literally a
Everybody
ritual.
knows it.
Yeah. Like, it's not super convoluted and crazy to figure out. Like, you just jam it and like you get good results. I don't know.
Any single person that enjoys playing red as a color in competitive Commander can appreciate Dockside. And for the first time, this is actually appreciated by every single other color pie in the competitive Commander format.
I mean, for sure, in the list, we knew 100% Dockside had to at least be in the top 10. I mean, he is coming in at number 10, but we were like, he's just too much of a quake right now in the meta to not include.
Sure.
Yeah, so talking about where Dockside actually leads to a win versus when Dockside seems more of like a value play, when are you most scared of Dockside?
Well, I start really paying attention to it when I see people start to put a bunch of fast mana out, but you get a bunch of rocks, you get a bunch of enchantments, you say you got a fish and a bunch of soul rings out doing their thing. All of a sudden, Dockside becomes very relevant, and I really have to pay attention to what colors that person is playing, because that'll give me some clues into what they're going to be using it for. Are they strictly using as a ritual? What other mana do they have open? Are they going to try to ramp this up into something else? Or are they just trying to do a value piece? It's always relevant because it's always either going to be some smoke. It could be, like I said, a ritual. You could be going to try to use it for another combo piece. It demands your attention. And like I mentioned before, the chaos that comes from it just being red, it's an attention grabber. And I think that is part of why this card makes the list for me as far as flavor. Coming in at number 9, a card I'm particularly excited about. Always get excited to see it in my hand. It's green. I love green. Green's my favorite color.
It is known.
Veil of Summer. 1 green, instant. Draw a card if an opponent has cast a blue or black spell this turn. Spells you control can't be countered this turn. You and permanents you control gain hexproof from blue and from black until end of turn. It's fantastic. It basically says my stuff is going to resolve. My stuff has protection. And if you play it at the appropriate time, it can replace itself. It's fantastic. It's super versatile. I love cards that are always relevant. You can play it, again, as kind of a smoke show. You can play it the very first spell and say, look, this is what's going on. I'm going to try to pop off this turn. And it will demand people's attention. It usually demands some kind of a response, whether you're going to actually pop off or not. And it's just a great introduction to a turn that you're going to try to do some big things. You have to, as an opposing player, you have to do something about it or be prepared for what's about to follow. And that level of threat that it brings to the table is what makes it always a relevant card.
So, yeah, kind of tying into that, Veil of Summer is one card that I haven't always been crazy about until I really started just kind of playing it more and more and having more experience with it. And I quickly became really, really into the card. It demands a lot of respect. At minimum, cantrips for you. At best, it secures your win line for you. And I think that's huge. And I think this is a really hot take to say, but I think it's actually one of the more auto-include cards out there in this list. Like, you can kind of jam this into any green deck, and it's going to be pretty successful for you, I think.
Agreed.
It's going to do a lot of work no matter what.
Yeah.
You know, there's not a lot of genuine auto-includes in any format, in my opinion. This, I'm not saying it is, but it comes close to that category.
Sure. I kind of cringe at the idea of an auto-include, but this is one I'd have to agree. It's you play green, you got Veil of Summer, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of efficiency, this card goes absolutely through the roof. In terms of win-enabling cards, from my standpoint, I play a lot more blue farm, right? So we don't usually get to play with this magnificent green color everyone likes to play. This card seems more so like a reactive piece. However, you also cannot deny the fear that goes through your heart when you see a first main phase Veil of Summer go off. You see this and you just think to yourself,
sure,
oh crap.
Right. I think it's also worth talking for a quick second about its younger little brother, Autumn's Veil. Strictly, Veil of Summer is a better card, but it does have a nice counterpart, especially if you're stuck in Sans Blue, Sans White, especially if they're in Mono Green. They're great complementary pieces.
Cool. So bringing us in at number 8, we have Silence. Silence to cast 1 white. It's an instant. It reads, your opponents can't cast spells this turn.
No.
I mean, what more do I need to say? Jam it before you're about to go off, and if people don't react to it and respect the card, it's going to protect your win line. You can no longer be countered if people can't cast spells. Like, you're protecting yourself. I don't think much more needs said about it. I think it's super easy to use. The utility of it is simple, and it has huge results.
Yeah, we're going to keep this as a focused podcast. If we weren't, I could easily go on to a tangent about how many wins this card has single-handedly stopped.
That's true. Of Kevin's, specifically. Of Kevin's.
Specifically Kevin's. Also, let's talk for a quick second about the artwork. The artwork, sometimes you look at a card and you look at the artwork and you're like, wow, this is really cool looking, but it's not at all pertaining to the title. Clearly, the artist drew this bit of artwork to reflect the name
that
of the
is
card.
my reaction when somebody slams it down when I'm trying to win.
There's a face but no mouth, and his hands are like, I don't know what to quite do with my hands right now.
Man, I just see Jim Carrey.
It's a great card all around. Let's also talk for a brief second about its defensive capabilities. It doesn't say split second, but sometimes I feel like it does, especially if you know that someone's combo piece involves a sorcery.
Yeah, no, for sure. Somebody casts an AdNauseam. I can't respond to the AdNauseam with silence, but as that resolves, I can comfortably hit that silence to prevent them from doing the things to follow, just knowing that
No
they're going
rocks
to go
for them.
Yeah.
No rocks at all.
Right. You're going to try and do the thing. Sorry, I'm going to prevent that. You get your AdNauseam, you get the cards, but here.
Yeah, I mean, no more needs said about its defensive capabilities. In terms of win enablement, listen, guys, I play Cody, and you activate Cody, you play a silence. It's just, it is unbelievable. And for people that don't play Cody, I mean, you play a silence preemptively to your win attempt. This card typically, I mean, you can see, I almost in my head calculate 1 to potentially even 2 counter spells being spent on the silence alone. And for 1 white mana, I mean, you can't get a better pathway to clear the space.
And to also importantly to add, that's why we put silence at 8 above Veil Summer at 9. It's a very easy offensive and defensive card versus that Veil Summer is usually offensive, and it's a little bit trickier as the defense still can work. The silence is just an easier jam to prevent either side of the board from happening.
Just slightly more efficient, yeah.
So number 7 is a Hermit Druid. Yay! He's for 1 and a green, a creature human druid. He's a 1/1 power toughness with the activated ability for 1 green and tap. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a basic land card. We probably are not going to be running any of those in our deck with him in it, but it says put that card into your hand, and all other cards revealed this way into your graveyard, i.e. tap for 1 green and put your deck into your graveyard. The player in our pod that plays this is actually Isaac. What are your thoughts? Why did this card earn our number 7?
Yeah, so I have a Kenrith deck that I actually chose more of like the shell of Hermit Druid, and then I was kind of narrowing down the commanders for and ended up choosing Kenrith.
Big scary.
I was between like that Thrasios Timna or Kenrith, and I felt that Hermit Druid felt the best and just kind of fell into place well with the toolbox ability that you get out of Kenrith. But to dive into the card of why I originally even chose that as the shell I wanted to go for, it's easy for me to say since I'm a black player, but it does something that a lot of black cards out there right now are doing that are a really solid win line, just effectively dumping your entire library in your graveyard. And with that kind of idea, there's a lot of cards that are now, people have discovered that pair well with Hermit Druid in lieu of things, moving from the library to the graveyard. You got your Necromebia when it leaves the library and actually goes into the graveyard. You just put it into play, giving you that exact fodder for say. So you can play that Dread Return sorcery that lets you flash back, but you have to sacrifice a couple creatures, so you get a little bit more fodder there for the Necromebia. You're able to, reanimate, most of the time usually being a Thassa's Oracle. Or even still, like you can use that Hermit Druid in, one of the main reasons I ended up actually choosing Kenrith for the commander of the deck. I can take the Hermit Druid, pay 1, tap, dump my library into my graveyard, and I can grab, if Kenrith's already on the field, I can pay my ability just to reanimate at instant speed and get my Thassa's Oracle, and I could do that even on somebody else's turn in response to them like casting an AdNauseam. I can just win at instant speed on somebody else's turn. It doesn't even have to be on my own. So I think the toolbox of it and the universality is definitely there, and I liked that.
That's a good point you kind of bring up. Hermit Druid typically doesn't yield to a whole lot of stacked pieces. I mean, unless you got like the Curse Totem effect, of course, especially if you're running like a Kenrith, and then you're really hurting from that, type of effect. But more times often than not, actually your deck specifically is pretty stacks oriented. And Hermit Druid being a creature, I think, is super relevant. I mean, Aaron, you're big on creatures.
True. I do love a good creature. Again, just because they're really difficult to deal with. A body is always typically harder to take care of. But the flavor of this card of being able to just take your library, overturn it, put it in your graveyard. I mean, let's not also forget that this is a green creature. It's a little flavorful, especially for green, but there's just so much versatility in that and so many things that you can do from that upturning.
Yeah, creatures are easy to tutor, right? And I mean, I think there's so much strength to be talked about this card's mana efficiency. At least when I see Isaac play this card, I don't for some, even though I know he's about to win, I don't have the bells screaming in my head to counter it. And I think that that's true at a lot of tables, is people don't always counter it because they're like, well, I mean, all he's doing is putting us on a clock. You know, this is cEDH. I can't spend my counter spell unless if it's going to help me win the game or stop someone from winning. And I think oftentimes Hermit Druid is kind of difficult to see that he is, you know, actually the win line. I mean, people know you're doing it, but they still just let it resolve nonetheless.
Yeah, and all the points I think even that I'm making here too are in lieu of the fact that I play Hermit Druid with the intent of having some sort of haste enabler. It's something you can definitely play the card past turn and then come back to you and tap and do your win that way. But it's just really scary kind of leaving the card exposed because everybody knows exactly what's happening.
Leave yourself a little extended.
Yeah, you put yourself on like a ticking time clock till people know like they have to try and get rid of it or they have to win instead, you know, just remove it that way by winning the game. I use the Kenrith as the commander to give it haste for one red. It gives it trample as well. I also even play like Mass Hysteria or Concordant Crossroads are all cards that play into the Hermit Druid strategy really well because you're also probably running a lot of dorks, so you're not going to be too penalized by having that haste giving for the whole table.
So, speaking of ways to gain access to your entire library, Isaac, what's our number 6?
Yeah, we got Ball of Citadel. Casting costs 3 and 3 black. It's a legendary artifact. It reads, you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost. And it even has the tap effect of sacrifice 10 non-land permanents. Each opponent loses 10 life. So effectively, you're able to do kind of like a mini AdNauseam, able to look at the top card of your library at any time, choose that card, and you're like, I want to play this. It's 2 CMC. You pay 2 life instead of its actual CMC, dump it right onto the battlefield, and you can keep on going, keeping on taking things off the top of your library and playing them. Kevin, you're currently running this in a couple of decks and recently kind of been introduced and fallen in love with. Give us your rundown of what you, I guess, think of it. You're probably the best person for it, so...
Oh, man, heavyweight. I'm super high on the Ball of Citadel for sure, which is kind of funny to say because starting off, actually, you were the one that was trying to convince me that this is almost another PETA AdNauseam type effect. Yeah. I was like, no, man, this is kind of clunky. I mean, it's hard
baby
to
Nas.
It's hard to cast.
Costs 3 black in addition to the 3 colorless. I mean,
yeah. But I mean, I eventually forced it into a few different decks. And it is so much fun. It's definitely, I think what it's got going for it more than anything is just its uniqueness. But yeah, Ball of Citadel definitely does, in fact, get me there whenever it does resolve.
Yeah, well, it requires a little bit higher intelligence to play than Tyranny of the Abyss or AdNauseam. Like, it's not as easy of a card to resolve. Like, you have to have it kind of your board state preset up. I think you have to sculpt the deck around it even a little bit more.
Smart people only.
I love that component of it. I think you really nailed it. It's fun to just see in casual decks. You can rip some cool stuff off of it, but in the more the cEDH portion and that mindset, you're going to have I would assume, a good portion of your deck built around this card. You have to be able to manipulate the top card of your deck to some degree, and there also has to be some ability to replace the top card of your deck even just to avoid playing, you know, you've already got your land played for your turn. You're ripping, you've got a great thing going. That's part of the chaos to this card. You've got a good churn going, so to speak, and all of a sudden you pop out to another land, and you went from being able to be that close to closing it to completely stuck. So saving things intentionally with the idea that you're going to play this card, say saving your fetch land or whatever else that you might be
using
able to
top
just
deck manipulation and
exactly using that to your advantage. You gotta have to set it up, and it's kind of a big brain card. Yeah.
No, it certainly is. The number of synergies that Bola Citadel has with so many other cards, and I think that's actually something that almost differentiates Bola Citadel from other cards that we're talking about here on the list, is just how many synergies this one has. Some of those, like fetch lands, for instance, are highly synergistic. You know, say you haven't played your land drop, you find a fetch land off the top that you play as your land for turn, and then you run into another land on your storm turn, so then you crack it. That boom, that's a synergy there. A couple of my favorite ones, other than the obvious like Sensei's Divining Top or cards like Counterbalance, are super fun with this. I mean, I don't know, what are some of your favorites here?
Yeah, I think Bola Citadel falls into a deck that's definitely sculpted around it, so you're not usually having to pay a ton of life and getting instant value out of it. You know, quick, easy, you know, and churning through a lot of stuff rapidly. I think even to that, I got a question. I'm gonna put you on the spot, Kevin. Bola Citadel, when you typically resolve a card, I'm asking you because you've probably resolved it more than Aaron or I have.
Definitely more.
How many cards?
Yeah.
Do you think you're averaging from, you know, playing a Bola Citadel? How many cards do you think you're typically getting off of it? And granted, this is obviously taking in mind a deck that's sculpted around the card. You know, it's you're putting this into a deck that is meant to be played around Bola Citadel. So, how many do you think you usually get?
That's a really interesting question to ask. I'd say it has a very wide spread of spells that will be cast once the Citadel, or at least on that turn. Once it resolves, there's a pretty wide spread. You know, it's like how many. To draw up a parallel analogy, how many games do you play in a turbo deck? Because this is a turbo win con, right? More or less. How many games with your 5 CMC commanders like Kroms and whatnots? How many games do you get a turn 1 Krom? Is typically how many games I get a win off the Bola Citadel with, say, 10 plus spells. Now that could also be really shortened. Say I draw something like when I say draw, I do mean rip off the top. I rip off the top, say like an Imperial Seal. That's easy mode, right? Because then I just go directly for whatever card that I want to be played next, even if that's just setting up, a deflecting swat or a force, or any type of interaction spell. But yeah, I'd say probably at least, to answer the question, probably like 5 spells usually is pretty average. It doesn't always win right then and there on the spot. Right. What I found is like a lot of times after, you're like, ooh, yay, I'm playing from my library. You're like, crap, you do get stuck. Probably 1 in 3 attempts with the Citadel. But that doesn't necessarily mean you lose the game, because I actually find it easier to get stuck on interaction cards, especially if you're running blue. You'll like run into a dispel or something, and it's like, oh, this is awkward. I can't do this. But what that means is, when you pass the turn, you've got 1 life dispel to play.
Right. Right. When you pass the turn, if you've played a Bola Citadel, you've got your opponents out of full court press for sure.
Oh yeah, you're in a really good spot.
Yeah.
The ability, the tap ability on this legendary artifact, I'll read it one more time. Sacrifice 10 non-land permanents. Each opponent loses 10 life. I mean, I don't really know why that's on the card, but it is extra spicy. And when you actually get to tap it and do that, and do something that is relevant with that tap ability, I mean, that's got to feel extra good.
Dude, I never realized it. You were just like reiterating the legendary artifact. Sisai can get it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so the next one up our list is one that can't necessarily be cheated into play with effects like Transmute Artifact and what have yous, but has other sneaky ways to get in there for cost-efficient methods. Aaron, why don't you take our next one?
Cool. This is a creature I'm pretty pumped about. It's called Razzicath, the Foul-Blooded. It's got a pretty costly casting, CMC, 5 and 3 black.
But usually you're ideally cheating into play in some fashion, right?
The most efficient way that I see this come out, and have done so myself, is through various ways of cheating it out. It's a big guy. Legendary creature, demon. Flying, trample. Pay 2 life, sacrifice another creature. Search your library for a card and put that card into your hand. then shuffle your library. It's also an 8/8 body, which becomes surprisingly relevant given the opportunity and occasion. This, again, it's a creature. It's hard to interact with, and oftentimes the fact that it's being cheated into play, it's too late to respond to the actual creature, and the fact that you can pay 2 life and sacrifice another creature, you can keep doing that in response to people attempting to mess with it.
Once it hits, it's really hard to stop. That ball starts rolling, and it's really hard to stop it rolling.
Usually it's already too late.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. And actually something you're kind of hitting on is I feel like a lot of people forget the fact that this dude's a creature. You know, should his
an
reanimate
8/8 creature with flying and trample
in black.
In black.
Stacks is popular, guys. But I mean, no, people forget that you don't have to reanimate him as his singular line of play. You know, should the game persist to the point where you can actually pay the 8 to get him in, he's hard to counter.
Yeah, I really enjoy the politics of this as well. You know, he's a toolbox to be able to fetch up any card, whether it be a win line, take care of a problem, but also who you're going to decide to swing it at. There are we talked briefly before about using your life total as a resource. I think this is a great representation of that. But when you start chunking somebody for 8 at a time, in that lies power, and you can use that politically to decide, you know, like, give me a reason to not come at you, or, you know, let me hear your reasoning for going at this person. You can kind of rally people around it. It's a fun kind of tool to use.
Right. I think Razzicath plays well in a stack deck. Dorks. Aristocrat is the blaring obvious one there.
I mean, how many decks do you know that literally had its entire deck named after it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I personally don't play the card. I don't have the massive amount of experience having played the card. But seeing the card played on the other side of the board, it is 100%. I have to counter this, or I'm losing the game. So it absolutely deserves my respect to that extent. I don't have that lengthy love relationship of casting it and winning the game myself, but I see a lot of other people do it, and it owns my respect for that. Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's well said.
Cool. All right. Moving up on the list. Moving from Razzicath at number 5, number 4, Finale of Devastation. Kevis, give us the details on this beast of a card.
Thanks, Isaac. Yeah, this beast of a card. So obviously it's green. It is a green with X. Sorcery. It reads, search your library and or graveyard for a creature with converted mana cost X or less, emphasize or less, and put it into the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. If X is 10 or more, creatures you control get +X and gain haste until end of turn.
What doesn't it do?
My God.
You look at the card and just insert the soundtrack of the T-Rex from Jurassic Park. Just getting it. I mean,
yeah,
it's also a card you just have to have in foil. It's super cool. It's always fun to play. Yeah, it's a fun card. It really is. The versatility of being able to pull something from the graveyard or from your library is huge. The versatility of what it can do is really, it just does it all, and it's in green. The fact that you can have it be kind of like a Crater Hoof effect,
huge,
is wild, absolutely wild. It's really just unlimited.
Yeah,
Kevin, what do you got?
I will firstly attest. I mentioned I was a Blue Farm player prior, and this is one of those instances in which I saw the spell resolve and thought to myself, oh, this is easy. He doesn't have his Thassa's Oracle in his library. It's in his graveyard. We already stopped this, guys. We are good. I politic the table to letting this card win the game. I mean, it's silly, but it does... That extra portion where it says and or graveyard, it's relevant.
Yeah, I think the bottom of the bottom of the floor on this guy, for a green and a green, you go grab a Dryad Arbor and start your ramp. At the cap, you are grabbing things that are a little bit more simple, like your Thassa's for the win, your Hermit Druid for a win. even just any value creature, like your Ranger Captain of Eos. That's a personal hot take of mine. I just love grabbing Ranger Captain with Finale of Devastation. It just feels amazing because you get to tutor it and then tutor again, and then you have just shit on the field from it. But you can still grab a hoof and other stuff. Like, you can grab things with it and win from combat, which isn't common in cEDH and feels really good. I mean, Aaron's huge on the combat damage side of it.
I like my bodies.
Yeah, he likes playing creatures, and Finale of Devastation is easily one of his favorite pet cards. I'm high on the card. We did some convincing to kind of prove to Kevin it is, and I think his jadedness of the card just being on the other end of it, receiving side, like, I understand, you know? It's a good card.
Yeah.
Unlimited power.
It definitely is. Not to mention cards, decks structured like Malcolm and Tana, for instance. This just instantly gets your Glinthorn Buccaneers onto the battlefield, which, I mean, easily ends the game.
I think something, too, that's worth mentioning, and we read the fact that it has haste, but that's just, I think for green, a haste-enabling mechanic is not very common. And I think that it's worth mentioning because this does set several different combos up. If you punch it up enough, like, talk about our Hermit Druid. All of a sudden, your Hermit Druid has haste. That's very relevant, and you just create it if you're, pumping it up enough. There are two separate win lines that you are now presenting. Yeah. Your Hermit Druid has haste, but you also have all of your creatures will be able to provide lethal damage, which enables you to take your dorks that are now probably useless at this point in the game, throw them in for lethal. You are now taking all the heat off of your Hermit Druid, and someone has to pay attention to a more immediate force, which is now a dork that is huge in size.
Right. Yeah. Playing into exactly what you're saying with Hermit Druid. I play Finale of Devastation and Kenrith with Hermit Druid, obviously, as we mentioned prior already. I get Finale of Devastation, and granted, I'm a really defensive player in this game, and I always want to go for the Ranger Captain or something to slow down the board state or to give me advantage or to prevent people from playing to some extent or the other. And I forget so often that Finale of Devastation gives my Hermit Druid haste, and that's just, as I've said it before, the easy line. Like, I forget that is a thing.
My God.
It seems crazy, but, like, it's so insanely powerful that I just, for 4 mana, so 2 colorless, 2 green, hand jam the Finale of Devastation, protect it. I get to the battlefield, my Hermit Druid, with haste, jam it. I get my then Hermit, which prevents things from being countered, and I jam my Dread Return and my Thassa's and win the game. Like, that is easy to do. That's easy magic, and it's an easy win.
The fact that you have to give it, at least 10 in the X to give it haste that's very costly.
Right,
but for decks that are running bigger lines, let's say as myself being a Kinnan player, Kinnan, step 1, make infinite mana. I mean, like colorless, colored, it doesn't matter. Make infinite mana and
turn 2.
Yeah, it's surprisingly easy. And I think that a lot of combos, if we talk about Dockside, people that run Dockside combos, when you have access to large or infinite mana pools, how can you best use that? This card's never a dead card.
Yep. Absolutely. And I mean, something else to speak of its potency in terms of win enablement. I've actually seen some people kind of punt fake with Finale of Devastation before, where X, say, is something like 3, and every player at the table begins scratching his head. Okay, is he just finding something? Maybe like a value piece, such as Ranger Captain of Eos is extremely popular.
Or the X or less.
Yeah.
Or less. It comes into play.
Maybe you're just trying to get an Allosaurus shut.
Guess what, fellas?
Right.
The less is actually my Thassa's Oracle, and I'm going to win right now. It's definitely worth speaking to.
It's great. It's fun. That is a fun card to resolve.
All right, so moving on. We're wrapping up Finale Devastation and moving on to number 3. Isaac, why don't you hit us?
Peer into the Abyss. 4 colorless, 3 black. It's a sorcery. It reads, target player draws cards equal to half the number of cards in their library and loses half their life rounded up each time. Forget all the halves. It doesn't usually matter. Target player draws cards equal to half the number of cards in their library. That's what matters. You're at minimum usually gripping 30 cards. It's huge. It sets you so far forward every single time this actually gets resolved. This is the purest point of a card that if somebody casts this, you have to counter it or you're losing the game. I think I've only whiffed on one Peer into the Abyss in the abysmal amount of times I've cast it. It secures wins consistently, and it demands your opponents to counter it. You definitely want to go into casting that with the proper notion that they're going to try and counter it. You need to be able to protect it and watch out for the deflecting SWAT still. But Aaron, give me your opinions. Being somebody that doesn't play back, I'm curious as to what you think on the Peer into the Abyss, as it's usually like the polar opposite of your kind of game plan that you usually go for.
Sure, Isaac. I think this is a super fun card, and being printed somewhat recently, seeing it more and more commonly in black. It's just spicy, and again, playing into black's theme of using your life total for whatever resource you can. When you're trying to close the game, and when you're hard casting Peer into the Abyss, or however you're able to play it, the loss of life is irrelevant. It does not matter. You are aiming to close it right then and there. Me personally, when I see a Peer into the Abyss played, I'm thinking, well, it's probably over, and we're probably in for a long turn, and we're probably going to sit here for 5 minutes waiting to hash out like which rocks and which what combo pieces are assembled or what tutors get laid out that they can get to this point. You do have the ability to to see some of that transpire and play out. But like I said, I think Isaac said it the best, you're going to be drawing probably a minimum of 30 cards. And if you have a deck that is turboed enough around a principle like this, a concept like this, you should be able to assemble, even if you tap yourself out totally to play it, you should be able to get enough rocks, you should be able to get enough all kind of stuff to be able to assemble whatever bits you want.
Yeah.
It is susceptible to a couple things. I want to talk about the fact that specifically a sorcery. Kevin, you also play this card all the time. Like, what have you found is like a showstopper when it comes to casting this card?
Oh yeah, I've definitely played this card quite a bit, especially with decks like a Rakdos +1, maybe like a Bad Farm. Or obviously more relevant, Grixis list, in which this is going to seemingly resolve. You see a silence in response to your Peer, your heart almost shatters.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from that, though,
you're going into a big discard phase.
Oh God,
Real
yeah,
big discard phase.
Oh God.
I want to talk about one thing real quick that is particularly relevant. I think there's a couple cards that do something like this ish. But when it says you are specifically drawing these cards, or target player is drawing these cards. It's not like you're exiling them. Your opponents have no idea like what you are grabbing or what you're getting.
Yeah,
it is all up to you. And I think there's a
right.
Real
it's not
advantage.
revealed. It's not revealed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a real advantage to that to some of its counterparts.
That's worth noting. Part of its strength. So I think even Isaac can really talk about this. Have you ever not won the game when you?
Yeah. So. I said before, I've whiffed one time. I've cast this card. It has to be over 100 times. It is without question. Now, granted, I say this with a ton of bias. Black is my favorite color, and this is the epitome of black. This is my favorite card to resolve. Hands down, I love it. It's super fun. And taking 5 minutes, yeah, it's a pain in the butt, but it feels sweet. Taking 5 minutes just to look through and sort your lands from the playable cards.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you get so much value from the card. It is extremely fun to actually resolve and play. And the card has gotten a recent boost lately with your Hull Breacher being banned. Notion Thief does hit your target player draws cards. Deflecting SWAT definitely decimates it. But those are really the two main cards you're looking out for. There's other ones out there, but just jamming that Peer into the Abyss with protection, it's super fun. It draws cards, it's easy, and easily gets you to the win. At minimum, you're getting some tutors that will then get you there. If you're playing a deck that's catered to it, you're playing a lot of fast mana, you're playing a lot of rituals, maybe some sack outlets to get more mana, like your Culling of the Week. It's huge.
It's an easy one. It's an easy one.
It's fun.
I mean, Aaron, why don't you take us into the number 2? Because, I mean, this top 3 it's pretty obvious you're winning the game at this point. Yep. What's our number 2 card?
I got this one, Kevin. We got coming in at number 2, AdNauseam. It's a big one. It's seen a lot of play, and for good reason. I think it also recently got reprinted, which was...
Made it cheaper. Yeah, double masters.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. AdNauseam. 3, 2 black. It's an instant. Very relevant. Reveal the top card of your library and put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to its converted mana cost. You may repeat this process any number of times. What more do you really want to ask for? It's fun. There's a bit of variety to it. No matter how many times you AdNauseam, it's very rare that you're going to get a list of cards you rip off the top. It's going to be even close to similar with the amount of cards that you're going to be able to rip through. You do have to kind of build around this theme a little bit. It's very rare that you're going to see an AdNauseam thrown into a deck just as a value piece. Like, you were trying to use
You got to watch your CMC in the deck.
Unless you're
Right,
Najeela. You see your Najeelas, but I mean...
Right. And I would say this is kind of an interesting counterpart. I would say it's kind of comparing an apple to an orange, but its counterpart being kind of a Peer into the Abyss, the same flavor, going about it in a very different way. They're both in black, obviously. I do feel like I've seen a huge influx of this card being played over the last year or two, just because it's very efficient to play this kind of turbo AdNaus style. It's efficient, and the fact that it's an instant and can be played at the end of someone's turn as they're passing to you, you can leave your resources open to deal with other things, and when the turn gets passed to you, you can pop it, and about that time it's just too late.
Yep. Tying into exactly what you said at that instant speed. At the pass of the turn or passing to your turn as an opponent's doing, amazing time to play it. In response to somebody trying to win the game, amazing time to play it. I love Peer in the Abyss. It's my favorite card, as I said, to resolve ever. AdNaus is definitely probably a close second. But where AdNaus has this, extreme gain to where it's just better, is that instant speed, and it doesn't hit you as hard on that CMC cost. 5 versus 7 is significantly better, but massively and most importantly, instant speed versus sorcery is a huge difference. That is the difference of...
It feels twice as spicy.
Yeah, of you protecting yourself from losing the game, or you just using it to win the game. You can use it more offensive and defensively, versus Peer in the Abyss is strictly an offensive card. It's no situation is it defensive, really.
I think that maybe even part of what you're saying is the fact that it's instant. You can use it almost as like a forbidden Hail Mary tutor type scenario.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's that forbidden tutor type of thing. Like, I don't have a way of staying in the game unless I use my AdNaus to rip cards off the top of my library to hopefully get my free counter magic to keep myself in the game and try and recur something else to rip more cards again.
Another vantage point of AdNauseam, while we're specifically contrasting it to something like Peer into the Abyss, we're looking at it as a 5 CMC spell as opposed to a 7. In reality, we got to consider the end step AdNauseam, in which case it's almost like you can almost view it as a free spell to cast, because you're going into your untap
you don't have to go into discard. You get to keep all the cards you rip off of it.
Oh yeah, you don't have to worry. You could have played every single mana rock or whatever dork or whatever accelerant cards you have. You don't need to rely on a single one of them to actually get you the win. Past that, AdNauseam does in fact get around effects like no longer Hull Breacher, but still Notion Thief, or even Smothering Tithe.
Let's talk about staxing effects. Labyrinth. You can't draw more than 1 card per turn. This is a solid workaround through that. And stacks, I feel like it's just becoming more and more popular.
Deflecting Swat doesn't hit it either.
Ooh.
Deflecting Swat hurts. It does.
Let's also mention, especially that now these are kind of together, being positions 3 and 2, being Peer in the Abyss and then AdNauseam. Especially in black, tapping out 7 or 5 mana. That's an attention getter. You're like, what is? Oh, he's playing. You know exactly what's coming, which is kind of cool.
Right.
It's fun to be able to play with ways to make this even further. Feel like a baller being able to play something that's such a high CMC, being able to play it and having something like a Passeggio. Let's get into Kamigawa real quick. One of the best sets ever. It's super fun to have something that makes it uncounterable.
Right. I think you brought up a thought in my head too that is absolutely huge. Anytime you see an opponent that's playing black that has 5 open mana that could meet the requirements for casting AdNauseam, everybody at the table's like, he's got AdNauseam mana, he's got AdNauseam mana, we need to watch out for that. That's how powerful the card is.
I think you closed a tournament recently with that same logic, and because people didn't take that seriously, I think that's how you were able to close it.
Yep.
I was at that table. I can attest.
Yep.
Kevin wishes he had a Veil Summer.
Yeah, no. In Kevin's defense, he politicked for people. He has AdNauseam mana. It was turn 2, and they were like, he has AdNauseam mana, and they didn't take it seriously enough, and it resulted in the win. All right, wrapping up AdNauseam, coming in at number 2. I'm going to pass to Kevin here. He's going to give us our number 1 slot for this list.
Oh, God. So what card could possibly, I mean, spell more doom than an AdNauseam? Well, friends, it has to absolutely be Underworld Breach. My God, what a card. I mean, for 1 and a red, you get an enchantment that reads, my God, this card's just ridiculous. It says each non-land card, in your graveyard has escape. Escape is a newer mechanic.
That Beyond Theros, right, got printed originally?
Yeah, it is. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost, plus exile 3 cards from your graveyard. So, I mean, this is just giving you access to everything that you've done, everything you've set up, essentially plus 3 exiling cards, right? So any fetch lands, any cards that are no longer relevant.
Fast mana that may have got like a Lotus Petal that you used, or something that got zapped, whatever it might be. It really helps you, lean into that, free spells to be able to kind of bring out of your graveyard. It's also one of those pieces that's never a dead. It's never a dead card.
Typically not.
Value or get me to the win. It's putting in work,
right,
the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, even though it's not necessarily a card that you're going to be playing turn 1 or turn 2 usually, even if it's in your opening hand, you're still typically like kind of happy it's there actually, because it is such an enabler. I think that's why we mainly included this on this list, because it could be argued that this is a win combo, but when in doubt, you play this card to start snowballing a roll to get into a win combo, and then it becomes a win combo. So I think that's where it fit in right, where yes, at the end all result, it is part of that win combo, but at the very beginning, it gets the roll started for you. It gets that tide shifted in your favor, and it starts accelerating you.
Sure.
Yeah, I kind of valued, specifically to my top 10 while we were kind of talking about this, the number 1 card for me that wins games without saying you win the game. We're talking about win enabling cards. Underworld Breach resolves. Guys, I just win that game. Either so many resources are expended to trying to stop what either happens right then and there or thereafter that, I'm in such a great position to win. And there's so many different pieces, regardless of what other colors you're playing. Grinding Station, Stitcher Supplier, the obvious Brain Freeze.
LED.
It just abuses so many different cards and exploits unbelievable strengths in just almost too easily. Aaron, what do you think?
Well, I don't really play red that much. I love the concept of red and the fact that it brings chaos and mayhem to the table. But I think for me, part of why I fully can agree that it can be at number 1, outside of some of the flavor that it brings, is the fact that we talked before about it being in your opening hand. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Some of these cards on this list, let's say like number 6 or number 5. Number 6 was Bolas Citadel. Number 5 was Razzicath. Like, I don't particularly want those in your opening hand
ever.
But a lot of times, people that run Underworld Breach, it's not necessarily the main card that you want for that combo. In fact, sometimes I feel like I see Underworld Breach and say like a Brain Freeze being used as a secondary win line. It's not necessarily the person's primary. It's still incredibly efficient. And with the inclusion of Underworld Breach as even a value piece or a secondary win line, it's because of it's it's CMC. It's one that I'm not going to veer away from to ditch, but it might depict what cards I'm going to be tutoring for because it's going to be easier to go after that secondary win line when I have that in my hand. Isaac, what you look like?
Yeah, I've got something. So I want to tie in exactly what you said.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you said is a hugely important point. Right now, I feel like the meta is super it's super hyper focused on this Thassa's Oracle. That's the meta. That's how you win. And I'm not disagreeing. Yes, that usually is the card that reads you win the game.
Or reliable.
The thing that is meta is how you get to that card. That's what your deck usually often is. I think the vast majority of the cards on this deck are things that actually get you to resolve a Thassa's Oracle. Underworld Breach is at the number 1 slot because it does it the most efficiently. It is what gets that rolling the best. It gets you to that Thassa's win. Granted, there's plenty of other things other than Thassa's Oracle that Underworld Breach can get you. But I think at the end of the day, like people get so stuck on the Thassas. No, it's how we get to Thassas. Our meta right now is an Underworld Breach meta. It's not a Thassa's meta.
Oh, that's a
It's a hot take for sure.
It's a hot take, but it's a good one, man. I couldn't agree more because something like Underworld Breach hits the field and it's just like, hey, remember that one time, guys, that I tutored for some card that's now currently in my hand? Well, guess what? I've got 9 to 12 cards in my graveyard, so that means I'm going to tutor 2 to 3 more times, potentially 4 other cards that are giving me the win plus protection. If you counter those, I may already have the win in hand.
The other thing too that I think makes Underworld so powerful, and not to drag on this, but compared to like an AdNauseam, you really have to change the entire synergy of the deck around AdNauseam to include even the CMC not being high. Underworld Breach doesn't have all those stipulations of actually creating the deck, of the things it needs to make happen. It's really just a couple small key pieces, and then it does its thing. It doesn't have all like the setup of all the same needed fast mana or the sack outlets for mana that like your standard Grixis, AdNauseam, Jamet deck has. Granted, you still put Underworld Breach in those decks because it is so efficient. It's literally better than those. It is simpler. It requires less mana. It's more proficient, and it's harder to stop being an enchantment.
Something I want to kind of point out too, which I find curious, the escape cost is fun. Escape is just a cool mechanic. It's also incredibly efficient, as we have found. The card reads, each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. How many cards on our top 10 win-enabling cards for this episode are eligible targets through Underworld Breach? Yes, if you don't have access to any of these combo pieces, specifically Brain Freeze or LED or whatever it might be, how many of our cards on this list are also eligible targets? Like we've talked about a lot of non-land permanents that we talked about a couple instants and sorceries for sure, and rightfully so, but a lot of them are permanents that they
tie
grab
into your Underworld, like specifically like Underworld Breach. I'm probably going to try and resolve a silence after that. I'm going to cast a Dockside afterwards to fix my mana and to make more mana for me. Like the cards in this list play into number 1 so much, which just absolutely solidifies it where it stands at 1. I think
Underworld Breach is a pyramid scheme.
Yeah,
God, man, it really does not discriminate. Underworld Breach it's giving you your finale of devastation.
Underworld Breach. If you have 3 friends and your friends have 3 friends. Escape is fun.
Jim Halpert meme explaining pyramid schemes.
Oh man, it just wins games, guys. It just wins games.
How do we feel about talking about some of our personal honorable mentions?
No, absolutely. So each of us also picked, outside of this regular top 10, which we tirelessly kind of figured out and even battled back and forth with each other what we thought were some of those best options. But we all picked out personally our own honorable mention. I'll pass you to Aaron, who has his 2 picks of what he thinks are on his personal, maybe we'll even call it like his own top 12. These are like 11 and 12 maybe.
Sure. Just want to make it very clear that these cards don't necessarily reflect me as a person, but I'm going to lead off and say
yes, they do.
Shh, let it happen. Grand Abolisher. Grand Abolisher it's a body. It's on a 2/2. Double white. Creature, human, cleric. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. I don't know what else you want on a creature. Note that it says that your opponents can't cast spells. That's not like an effect that gets transferred to whoever the active player is, say like a Docile Falling Leaf. This is just, it's just great. It's just super, super good. Very spicy. Again, it's one of those things that you drop it and people are like, well, we got to do something or else. And it's always going to demand a little bit of tempo, You drop a Grand Abolisher, you are dictating what's going to happen that turn and people's reactions, and they should be reacting accordingly. And again, I keep saying it, it's on a body. Yeah. It's hard to deal with. The double white can sometimes become very relevant, painfully so, but it's still very worth it. And as someone who is determined to make green and blue our Selesnya, side piece that doesn't really seem to ever really get much love in the cEDH format, it's just a great complementary thing.
Yeah, and Abolisher can easily be slept on, guys. I mean, oftentimes you'll see him come down as a turn 1, turn 2, even 3 drop, where you're thinking to yourself, he doesn't quite necessarily have the resources to go off. Sans black decks aren't going to have anything explosive like an AdNauseam, or whatever other cards that we've already talked about. He can easily be slept on, and this essentially says I don't need to worry about protecting my actual win con, or stopping anything else that's on the board that's happening during my turn.
Yeah. Quickly to mention, I think Grand Abolisher is really politically kind of funny, actually. It's a fun card to play. I think it actually forces people to kind of fumble. When you actually resolve this card, people think they're now on a ticking time clock till your turn comes around again before they have to win before that happens. And it causes a lot of punts. Sometimes it's a punt, sometimes it's just a fumble, but people think they have to go for it, usually when they're not ready. And it plays into your advantage even more. By the time those fumbles happen, it gets to your turn, it just secures you even further.
Right. I think that's a good point. Something that's kind of worth mentioning about this style of card is the fact that it can come up a lot of times in stacks, but if you're playing Selesnya or just white in general, the timing of it is critical, obviously, and if you want to get it to stay out, sometimes even playing it turn 2 and intentionally tapping yourself out to be able to play it, and people know that, say your combo that you're going to be trying to be running is 7 CMC, they know that the chances of the next turn you popping off are slim to none, so that might get that chance of slipping underneath the radar, and it gives you a little bit of time to actually assemble something and not getting
people
messed with.
can misplay into that and think you're doing a value play easy.
Sure.
What would be your 12th on your added to favorite picks kind of thing?
It's got to be Thrasios. I'm a big Simic player. Blue is, it's not my favorite color, but it allows me to do what I want to do, and that is play green.
Who's Thrasios?
Let me tell you about him. Thrasios, Triton Hero. It's Simic to play. 1 green, 1 blue. Legendary creature. Merfolk Wizard. It has this wonderful ability. Play 4. Scry 1. Then reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it on the battlefield tapped. Otherwise, draw a card. I don't really know what else you might want for an activated ability. Kind of does it all. And the fact that it has partner is super cool. I'll also go ahead and talk about the power and toughness real quick. It's a 1/3. There's a lot of things, a lot of spells, a lot of red spells I feel like that can do 1 to 2 damage. And on a 2 CMC commander, he's a little tougher to get rid of as far as doing damage. Lightning Bolt obviously will still get him. But he seems to be surprisingly resilient when it comes to the 2 CMC commanders, which, as you know, I play a lot of, almost exclusively.
That's true.
I think I have to say why he is such a fun piece and win enabler is I love mana sinks. I like having every single bit of my resources exhausted at all times. And being able to have him out on the field, and maybe I have 7 mana available. Yes, that might only be enough for 1 activation of Thrasios, which is 4. but that poses such a threat of someone who looks at my hand. Maybe I have 5 cards. The chances of me having some kind of interaction, and in this format, it also being a free piece of interaction, is very high. So having that option to pump 4 and possibly grab more, that in and of itself is something that will ring true in someone's mind, and it'll potentially inhibit what they are going to do.
I think it's cool that like you have Thrasios on here. This is actually so far on the list the only like commander eligible card. Like there's no other like actual
Razzicath, but who does that?
Okay, yeah, sorry, you're right. He is right. I overthought that. But you're also putting this in the 99. Like
that's part of why I made my list.
Yeah,
yeah, he shows up a good bit. He's just that powerful. He's just that raw. Not necessarily all roads lead to Thrasios, but there's a lot of roads that lead out of Thrasios that are just unlimited potential.
Right. Moving on to Kevin. Your 2 honorable mentions. Lay it on us.
Oh, man. So my 2 honorable mentions, and to reemphasize, these are spells that I feel like when these resolve, the decks that they are in are going to grant me win. I have next up, it can very easily be bonus round, actually. This is a red sorcery for 1 red. It reads, until end of turn, whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, that player copies it and may choose new targets for the copy. So obviously, this is going to be a storm enabling card. I just gotta say, every single time that this spell resolves, the things that I'm able to do with the spell are just so absolutely incredible. Whether it be through other breach lines or through other, red as a more recently popular color to try to play. Bonus round just gets you there. Right? I mean, the only setback obviously being that it reads a player. It is a symmetrical effect, allowing potential interaction from your opponents being doubled.
Right. Yeah, so
you can almost enter the Godo argument here, where
rest in peace, moment of silence. Go on.
Yeah, of course. I mean, people see that it says a player and think to themselves, this means that I get 2 interaction pieces, and almost think that they're safe with their force of will in hand, where in reality, they're not going to actually force of will until they see, until it's almost too late, right? Wherever your spell is that's going to officially close out the game, it's too late at that point. And for that reason, I think bonus round is just way too much value. It wins you the game, period.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the interaction, though, that is super, super efficient. Let's talk about our packs. Let's talk about our forces. If you're getting copies of those out, sometimes there is penalties to casting those, and when you start to lay a bunch of spells down for a big war and they're all doubled, like that stuff you got to really take into consideration.
Yep. Like to dive directly into what you said, when you're playing into a bonus round with packs, you're like thinking like, yeah, I have 2 packs now, but you have to think of it more like you're playing into a possibility storm, not a bonus round, because he's casting that spell at a pivotal time in a pivotal deck that can actually benefit from this card, and is going to be able to use that tenfold and count both of your spells. Like reading the flavor text on the card, it kind of explains a lot of it. When the twin spell bonus round begins, the crowd rises to its feet in anticipation of incredible combination. That embodies the entire card.
A true red card, a little bit of chaos.
True red.
You gotta love it. Yeah, so my second honorable mention, and to finish wrapping the bonus round, the reason it's only ever an honorable mention on our collective list is for the reasons kind of aforementioned, if you will. My other one is going to be High Tide. High Tide is an absolute tried and true strategy build around, right? I mean, High Tide reads at instant speed, mind you, for a total cost. Your action economy only need be produce 1 blue until end of turn. Whenever a player taps an island for mana, that player adds additional blue to his or her mana pool. Okay, so obviously with this spell in your deck as a win-enabling strategy, you're going to have quite a few islands. The only real downside to this is Carpet of Flowers, okay? Which is one of the 99. It's never really being tutored for.
And it's often just a sideboard card in people's decks.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sure. Especially today, this spell is seeing play as in terms of win enablement in a lot of Krark builds, right? So you're actually getting 2 High Tides, which gets even absolutely crazier. You add in all the other Storm cards that are going to frantically search, untap lands, continue to just give you this gigantic amount of value. And with that much mana, you typically just win the game.
Right. I think you do have to be very careful because when you play it or when you go to copy it, I think part of what makes it very fair is the fact that all islands tap for additional mana, including your opponents. So you do have to be very careful about when you decide to pull that trigger, and I think that that's part of what makes it fun. And like I said, very fair.
Yeah. Isaac, what are your honorable mentions here?
All right, so my first honorable mention, I fought for it to be on the top 10. In reality, they voted it down for a reason. It doesn't belong there, but it's still a very fun card. Final Fortune, it's a red card. Casting costs we're looking at are red and a red. Instant speed, take an extra turn after this one. Yeah, you heard that right. At the end of that turn, you lose the game. I think it's the truest embodiment of what a red card is. A lot of fun with it. Insanely terrible downside.
It's a gambling man's
card.
Yeah,
it's a gambling man's card. Gamble, but I am a black player at my soul. I've said it already. I like resolving that Peer into the Abyss or that AdNauseam. Every once in a while, you'll whiff on those, or sometimes you'll get a not ideal result for them. It happens. Final Fortune is like your easy bailout for that. You get a bad roll, you run out of mana, you cast your Final Fortune, protect it to resolve, you get another turn. At the end of that turn, you lose the game, but you're not usually getting to that point where you actually lose the game. Usually you're winning on that extra turn. You're playing this card in a situation where you're actually able to win the game from it in no other circumstance. Sometimes you can do it defensively where somebody else is about to win the game and you can smoke spring and just kind of cast this card as like a bluff, or even to take an extra turn to try and prevent them from winning and maybe have an instant seed win on yours. But it still demands that attention from the table. And it has got me quite a few wins, and I've quickly fallen in love with the card. Getting a win off of a Final Fortune feels literally better than almost anything else.
Is there a card that is almost exactly like Final Fortune? Does it have a brother? Does it have a twin?
There is. There's another one.
There's a few.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah.
There's one in red, and I actually think there's something similar-ish in green.
You gotta love the concept. The idea behind it comes at a high cost, but let's get back to the fact that you run Peer into the Abyss and AdNauseam. How many times have you played, say, an AdNauseam and have had to also play it on your turn, and you have your combo assembled, and maybe you have exactly enough mana, or maybe you're one shy, or maybe you have exactly enough mana and you don't have anything held up for interaction to protect it.
Right.
Being able to play this says, I get to reset, I get to draw a card, and now I have full resources to do exactly what
everything's
I want to do.
Untapped.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
it's just versatile.
It falls directly into play in the Grixis package. I think it's an easy include. I'm a Grixis player at heart. I'm a black player at my core. And this pairs very well with those cards that already are put in those decks, where you're trying to win at all costs, even if that costs means you lose the game. I think it matches the embodiment of Grixis perfectly.
And something fun that we absolutely have to notate about a card like Final Fortune is actually doing it in response when you were just about there, but just shy of the win, someone thinks they have it, so they throw out their vampiric tutor, and say it's, you know, your player 2 and player 4 throws out their vampiric tutor. You can just snipe that turn, you know, with your final fortune, and all of a sudden, you know, that large amount of value that you got is completely shifted to the next player. You know, there's something that has to be said about that.
Yeah, I think what makes this card so fun is you do see it oftentimes in that Grixis lineup, and like we said before, black, you're gambling with your life. The red is what lets you gamble. The black is what lets you gamble with your life. And the blue allows you to say, yes, I am doing this, or no, you are not going to do this. It's kind of a you're risking it all. And I think that your pick plays directly into your style. I think that's why it's a good flavor pick for you.
Right. My second honorable mention, Limdul's Vault. Another one that I kind of wanted to be on the main list, but in reality, it's not on the caliber of those 10. Reading the card, casting cost, blue and a black. It's an instant. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. As many times as you choose, you may pay 1 life. Put those cards on the bottom of your library in any order. Then look at the top 5 cards of your library. Then shuffle and put the last card you looked at this way on top of it in any order. I like the top deck manipulation. The card plays really well into the Bola Citadel, as we priorly have already mentioned. In a lot of accounts, it really acts as kind of a mini AdNauseam, where you kind of get to pick what you're doing next. For even if you're just going as simple as the next 5 draws you're doing, you kind of get to pick what you're happening then. Or you can even take one of the really good cards of those 5 and then shuffle the way with a fetch land that you've already anticipated. It is a dreaded card to resolve. A lot of people know it takes a long time. It does.
Yeah.
It's
I think
tricky.
For that reason, it's lost some popularity.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as far as the cEDH community is concerned,
it's
still
one
a very
of the
legitimate
least
card.
favorite. I'd say, actually, no, I comfortably say it's probably the least favorite card in the meta that's not Stags. Just because it takes a long time to resolve, and a lot of people play it not really knowing what they're doing, kind of similar to like people play Senses Divining Top. It's tricky. You're playing with the top of your library, you're shifting things around, you're having to anticipate what you're going to be doing a couple turns out. So it's a high skill cap card. I don't think it's an easy card to play.
It definitely is. And something I'll actually support you on Limdul's Vault being one of your personal picks here is I'm probably never going to counter a Limdul's Vault.
I've never had it countered personally. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I've never had it happen.
Like if I'm running a Spell Pierce, maybe, but it's still it's not like I don't know. Also, speaking of which, it's not something I feel like you ever really tutor for. It's something that pops up and you're like, oh, but you can tutor for it and that can get you that win. Yeah. But it's one that pops up and you're like, oh, okay. Also, I don't feel like I don't really see many cards printed from this set anymore. I was like, what set was that? Was Limdul's Vault printed from?
Alliances, I think, was its original printing. It came out in a commander set too. I'm not sure the number on that. I want to say
gangster.
I want to say Commander 17, but I'm not 100% on that one.
Yeah, it's a gangster card. It's been around for a while. I think Isaac summed it up pretty well in saying that it's not the most popular card received or being played, because it does take some time and it can be confusing. But the raw power that it provides is just it's just unreal.
Yeah, and I like the defensive capabilities it even offers. I like playing defensively a lot. At instant speed, I can use this card defensively to do things. I can cast it in response to a draw trigger of my own to ensure I'm ripping off the top exactly what I want. And only paying 1 life per every 5 to get a card, I'll probably be able to get exactly what I want. I can churn through my entire deck more than once, actually, on that 1 life per every 5.
Sure.
You know? If I'm at 40 life, I can do it twice before I die. You know, that is worth noting. It similarly has a kind of feel where you can also use it as a Hail Mary, kind of like a Plunge in the Darkness. I don't think it's on the same caliber for its offensive capabilities, but I'm higher on this card than Plunge in the Darkness because it still has defensive abilities.
And I think to adding to the skill cap, when you are manipulating the cards that you are pulling up, you're manipulating the cards that you're bottoming, and if you have damage reduction or negation, this can present some very convoluted loops to get exactly what you want in your deck, but it is possible.
Right.
Well, guys, I think this is going to start to wrap us up. I think we really got into some pretty cool ideas, some pretty cool arguments. I hope that, there was at least some creative ideas or takes taken. I think, again, you can almost kind of quantitatively take the existing data and figure out what exactly is the most efficient and what the most popular cards are. But this is kind of our take, our own personal flavor as players and brewers and engineers of, what we're trying to literally bring to the table. But I think that's also part of the beauty and magic, the brewing, what cards you get excited to play, and not just having to play the most efficient cards, but what serve both purposes, fitting my personal play style,
Right.
and also getting me most efficiently from point A to point B. And I think we kind of represented that accurately.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the beauty of the game. We're all allowed to play with our own bias, and that's the fun part for us.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. So, in closing, what cards did we miss, guys? Which cards do you feel are the most fun or efficient ways to get you to that end-all, be-all of that cEDH match?